asked to just talk really quickly about thinking about kind of the non-medical provider response, those of us who maybe work in victim advocacy or work in non-medical settings, and what's our role and what is our job, and how do we fit into this puzzle? Because I always describe this as a puzzle, and we all have different things to do and we all fit in different spots. But one thing, when Dawn and I were talking about we just were touching base yesterday. Dawn said one of the things that was so important was to have somebody who actually cares, and it feels like somebody actually cares about you. Somebody is actually listening to you. I know that we've heard from Dr. Guthrie talk about how important having that support is, and having family support, and having, social support. And so many of the domestic violence survivors we work with don't have any of that. And that's one of the roles that advocacy can really play, that advocates and those of us who work in crime victim services can really play. I also think, as we know, the vast majority of head injuries, trauma head injuries to the head, neck, and face, as well as strangulation, don't get any of that medical attention, don't get any of that medical care, don't get identified at all. And I see what we see in our programs. We have people who are struggling in their lives. We have people who are actually struggling with our services. They're struggling getting into our services. They're struggling with our processes and our protocols and the way we do things. They're struggling to remain engaged in services. And I think the brain injury piece just really helps us think about that in a different way. And we might be the first and only person that has ever connected this issue to domestic violence survivors. So for those advocates that are on the call, or people who work in those spaces, it is that awareness piece. Anytime we are having somebody share about their experiences with violence, when they talk about being hit or hurt in the head, neck, and face, when they talk about choking and strangulation, we're starting to say those things. We're starting to say things like, and again, we're not medical providers, so we're not diagnosing anything. We're not telling people they have brain injuries, but just, do you know that sometimes violence like this can cause concussions? And do you know that these kind of things can have these kind of impacts? And you know that if some of these things that are hard for you, we really want to work with you, and we want to support you in a way that really helps you. And we're here, and we're your support, and we're on your team. And we're going to work on forming those relationships with medical providers, with organizations like the Brain Injury Association of Ohio and the Ohio Brain Injury Connection, with that neural resource facilitators, with some, providers that have a better understanding of that. We're going to work on developing those relationships. I wanted to see, I know Kasey has been having some internet problems. So Kasey, and I can't see everybody, but Kasey, if you are out there, I found you. You're on my third screen. So I know Kasey also has a very kind of deep direct service experience and came to ODVN directly from a domestic violence program. So just wanted to see if you would share, Kasey, for just a minute, kind of what our role is as supporting survivors like Dawn and all of the other survivors that we work with in our programs.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And I would just like to take a minute again to thank Dawn for being here and sharing her experiences and her story with us. That was really beautifully said, and I'm really grateful that you're here with us, Dawn. So for my little piece of it, I think in addition to the awareness, it's also our role as advocates and those with non-medical backgrounds to validate the experiences that survivors have shared with me, both in my previous roles and in this one, has been a lot of, I know this is going on, but my doctor doesn't know, or my doctor doesn't believe me. Or a recent example was, my doctor does believe me, but insurance doesn't believe me. So to get further steps for care, we're running into more barriers that are more at a systems level, and things that just are out of my personal language and role to understand coding and billing and insurance language like that. So one thing that's been really beneficial in my work, and that's been beneficial for the advocates that I work with, is symptom tracking and medical advocacy. So a lot of the time we have survivors working with local programs. I know we have a few folks on here with us today from local programs, so thank you for being here. They're doing this on the grounds work, using care tools, using their own creative thinking to work with survivors, identify ways to manage symptoms and track symptoms. sometimes what we recognize is that tracking symptoms can be very validating for folks. Even just honoring that we're not medical professionals, but acknowledging, last week you told me you were having a significant amount of pain or sleeping problems. How are things going this week? So really following back up, listening to survivors, similar to what was said in the beginning of this session, is when you've seen one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury. And I would argue to say that you've seen one domestic violence trauma, you've seen one domestic violence trauma. So really listening to survivors, connecting with them, understanding what's going on, and letting them lead the way with our guidance, support, and networking. I can't solve this problem on my own. I know folks out there can't solve it on their own. And that's kind of the beauty of this network, in my opinion, is if you don't know, we've got awesome folks here that we can ask. So my hope is that for us non-medical professionals, we can get more comfortable asking those questions, more comfortable supporting survivors, and really acknowledging and validating and offering support in the ways that our advocates know how, because we have these skills, we have the listening and the empathy. So we just really need to go back to basics, trauma-informed care, and let survivors lead the way, because they are the experts and they know what they're dealing with.